第二節嘅財委會又繼續開始。咁我哋進入項目係第5項 FCR 括弧2013至14 63號文件嘅項目係請本委員會批准開立一筆為數。
This item invites members to approve the creation of a commitment of $50 million for injection into the Elder Academy Development Foundation. On the 23rd of January, the Labour and Welfare Bureau consulted the panel on welfare of this council in a special meeting, and there was a discussion of the funding proposal. For this item, we have Mr. Donald Chan, Deputy Secretary for Labour and Welfare, and Mr. Chow Wing Hang, Principal Assistant Secretary for Labour and Welfare. May I now invite Ms. Chen Yun Han, Chairman of the Panel on Welfare, to report on the deliberations of the item. On the 23rd of January 2014, there was a special meeting of the Panel on Welfare to discuss the funding proposal. In principle, members supported the funding proposal submitted to the FC. Some members pointed out that in some areas, the Elder Academy would focus on skills training, but in some other districts, the Elder Commission would offer courses on personal interest. So they would like the administration to look at the need to offer a variety of courses in different Elder Academies in different districts. All right. Questions? If there's no question, I will put this item to the vote. With those in favor of item number 5, FCR 2013-14, number 63, please raise your hands. Those against, please raise your hands. No one is in objection. Abstention? Again, no one abstains. I think the majority of members voting on this item and approves this item. This item is endorsed. Next item, FCR 2013-14, number 64. This item invites members to approve a non-recurring commitment of $200 million for injection into the Hong Kong Paralympian Fund. On the 23rd of January, the Home Affairs Bureau consulted the Labour and Welfare Bureau consulted the Panel on Welfare. For this item, we have Mr. Lam Kar Tai, Deputy Director of Social Welfare, Mr. Stephen Siu, Commissioner for Rehabilitation, Mr. Fong Kai Leung, Assistant Director of Social Welfare, and Mr. Patty Lai, Principal Assistant Secretary for Home Affairs. May I invite Ms. Chen Yun Han to report on the deliberation of the Panel on Welfare. Thank you, Chairman. On the 23rd of January 2014, there was a special meeting of the Panel on Welfare to discuss the funding proposal. Members supported the funding proposal in principle. Some members asked the government to increase the living allowance for disabled athletes so that they can be treated the same as able-bodied athlete, elite athletes, so that they can be involved in full-time training. And they also asked for more employment support for the retired disabled athletes. Dr. Fernando Zhang. Of course, we support the injection of funds into the Hong Kong Paralympians Fund, because I think through this fund, more support can be provided to disabled athletes. The current system of providing support to elite athletes is inadequate. There's a big difference between the able-bodied and disabled elite athletes. For able-bodied athletes, they can get as much as $20,000. That's not much, but for an elite athletes, they can make a living. But for the top grade disabled athletes, they only get $5,000 or more, and under $6,000. It's difficult to make a living out of that. And the Hong Kong Paralympians Fund can make up some of the shortfall, but they are only getting $2,000 or so from this fund. So altogether, they would get $7,000 to $8,000. It's difficult to maintain a decent living. Our disabled athletes have won big awards and medals in many competitions, such as Soa White in Paralympics. He won the medals in different competitions. In the international competitions for disabled athletes, our disabled athletes have been doing very well and internationally. But the support provided by the government has been very disappointing. We support this application today.
The government has it considered making the treatment for the able-bodied and the Paralympians equal. Now, of course, the award when they win, the difference is even bigger. It's 10 times. Now, they have to be full-time to fully engage themselves. These international competitions are not easy to win at all. Has the administration any plan to proactively raise the support of Paralympians, especially the top-level athletes, elite athletes? Perhaps we can ask the Home Affairs Bureau to reply. The Secretary. Thank you. Now, actually, we mainly look at the needs of the athlete when we make the arrangement. Now, for the able-bodied and the disabled, they have different needs. Now, looking at training hours, they differ significantly. For the Paralympian team members, they train about 8 hours per week. For special events, such as fencing and ping pong, it's more, it's 15 hours. For the able-bodied, Chairman, we're not talking about the training hours. They want to be engaged full-time, but they cannot live on these allowances. They can't even feed themselves. Now, can you let these elite athletes be engaged full-time so that they can have matching or equal treatment as the able-bodied when they attend these international events? Now, do you have policies that you can enlighten us on? Now, in our support to the Paralympians, including the bonuses to the elite athletes, now we have already been liaising with the relevant Paralympians or disabled athletes associations, such as SAM. Now, regarding the funding to the Paralympians Fund, we will work with the Social Welfare Bureau so as to provide appropriate support to the disabled athletes. So you have noted the members' concerns and you will reflect them to the authorities. Correct. Next, Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. I support very much this document in its contents and the additional funding. However, I note that the fund in the past 10 odd years since 2001, when it has been from which it has been operative. Now the financial assistance, now it was about 4 million. That was at its height, at its highest in 08-09, and then it has fallen to less than $3 million. Now, if we approve this funding, if we increase it by $200 million, then in 14-15, now you have you are no longer calculating by the 3 times the annual return, but by the annual return. Now, how much of the funds? How much funds can you actually? What's the actual amount that you'll be able to deploy? And also, the principle has not changed, but the rate of inflation has kept increasing. So, will the available funds start to decrease after a while? We thank the member for his question. Now, in the past 3 years, every year the average funding of the Paralympians Fund has been $3 million to provide support for the athletes, including support after the athletes' retirement. And from the records for the past 5 years, we expect that the disabled athletes and the relevant associations require annual funding of about $5 million, and the fund returns earned average per year in the past few years has been $750,000. Now, after we inject the $200 million seed money, we expect that the return every year will reach $5.5 million. In other words, every year we will have $2 million available for funding, because in the past 3 years our average funding has been $3 million. Now, I think this will be appropriate response to the needs of the associations and the athletes when they apply for support, including employment supplements. Now, on inflation, now if we follow the rules of the fund, the existing rules, we cannot deploy more than 3 times our investment returns. But with the funding now being considered by the members, then we will use the actual returns each year. We know that, but there will be inflation every year. Now, the $5.5 million, the amount available would decrease. Now, this fund is managed by the Director of Social Welfare. We have a management committee, and when there is inflation, the management committee will review the needs. If the $5.5 million is inadequate, then we will consider whether there should be an increase. So the director has his discretion, has the discretionary authority. Next, Mr. Chair Wai Chun. Now, of course, I very much support the $200 million injection. Now, how will you allocate the $200 million? Now, that includes sport development, living allowance, which has been a concern of members, and there is investment involved. So how will you allocate that? Are there existing guidelines? And the fund earns returns, so will you follow certain criteria so that the fund doesn't lose money? You have to be conservative, and that will affect the returns. Now, Perhaps there can be replies. Now, this fund was established in 2001, and till now, up to now, we have allocated $33.2 million, and part of it is for the sports associations to develop sports events. Now, that's $21.9 million. As for living allowance, that's 16.8 million. And then finally, for the retired athletes fund, living allowances, that's $150,000. So that has been the allocation over the past 3 years. Now, as for the investments side, now our main investments are in the shares of listed companies, Hong Kong dollar denominated bonds, certificates of deposit, and Hong Kong dollar and renminbi deposits. Now, we now know the allocation. Now, is this rigid, or Dr. Fernando Cheung mentioned that the living allowances are not enough? Will you allocate more, or will that leave less for sports development? Have you considered the various uses? Now, these are not rigid parameters. We have not set a fixed amount. We look at the proposal by the sports association that made the proposal, and whether it's really how deserving it is. Now, on the living allowance, now the management committee, after this funding, they will review the amount of living allowance. Yun. Now, this additional funding for the Paralympians is, of course, it's very beneficial, and I support it very much. When I read the document, I note that we are talking about the $200 million fund. Every year, about $5 million would be available for spending. Now, it will last about 40 years. Now, so it's if we spend the money over a period of time, it will last 40 years. Now, is that a wise arrangement? Why don't we give it a recurrent funding of $5-point-something million per year? And we are freezing $200 million, and the management is under the Social Welfare Department. They have a committee or group to manage this. Now, we have many large and small funds. Now, this wouldn't be a large fund. It's just $200 million. And yet we have to get a group of people to manage the fund, and then they make investments. Now, do they do the investment themselves, or do they work with other departments to manage it, or do they operate by themselves, and then their decisions may not be that effective? Why don't we use recurrent funding for this purpose? Now, actually, this is a financial issue. Now, the $200 million injection and the $30-odd million already in the fund will constitute a seed sum of a principal amount that will generate returns, and in the longer term, the fund will be able to increase. So we use this fund to generate $5.5 million per year, and in the method of investment, now we have had relatively little, a small number of funds of this kind. Back then it was $50 million. So we will study our investment strategies in order to generate higher returns to benefit the disabled athletes. My question has been, why don't you make use of recurrent funding? I don't think he will be able to answer this. It used to be $30 million plus, and they now inject more. They have previously operated in this mode, and they can only explain how they will use this money, but they can't really tell you why. There are financial officials here. Can they answer? When the fund was set up at the time, it went through the Finance Committee of the LegCo. It was approved by the FC, and all along we used the investment returns to pay for the requirements of the fund. Now, can other officials answer my question? Because this is a finance committee. The finance committee has to look at how money is spent. I believe the FC has to answer right now the question of whether this funding should be improved. The policy panels or committees can examine how this should be the right mode, and so this can be followed up in the panels. Next, Tan Ka-Piu. Now, I think whether it's the government or the committees or the members of the public, now people all agree that you should offer career prospects to these disabled athletes so that they can be like healthy people. That would be a good message for equality. Now, colleagues mentioned the living allowance. It's very much less than the allowance for the able-bodied athletes. Now, it's not a question of how much is enough. They should be like able-bodied athletes, elite athletes, so that they can make sports and competition a career. And you should adjust the sums allowances on this basis. Also, on page 3 of the document, now the qualified applications in 09, the amount approved was the same as the amount applied for. Sometimes the difference is as much as 50%. Now, what's the difference? Why is it that there's such a difference? Was it the difference due to employment or living allowance? Now, on the second part, on the difference, mainly this is due to the development of the sports concern. This is for the sports association concern, because we look at the proposal by the association, and that's how the money is mainly used for, and not for living allowance.
How
come there's a big difference between the number of applications and the number of grants or approved applications? Now, we have looked at the relevant regulations, and we cannot give out a grant more than 3 times of our income. Well, because we had to use part of our capital to pay for the grants, that's why our capital has been depleting, and the income has also been depleting. So that's the investment return. Yes, that's the investment return from the seed money. So for this $200 million, now if you put it, you put in the exchange fund, then each year you will get 5% in a profit. So each year, how much return do you have? 5 million. Now, if we stick to our present investment portfolio, then each year we will get $5.5 million. So for 3 years, there were differences between the number of applications and the number of approved applications. But you are talking about eligible applications already. And if there are more and more elite Paralympians, then what will happen? So that's exactly why we are injecting a sum of $200 million into the seed money. If the amount of seed money is bigger, then there will be more profits. Yes, we would definitely give you a green light, but we're only talking about 5.5 million per year. So in certain years, if the investment environment is not good, or if the inflation rate is very high, then actually we will manage that, because we have a management committee, and it will review the situation from time to time, and it will look at the number of applications approved. I think there's a certain degree of flexibility. Next, Mr. Yu Si-wing. Well, for Paralympians, I think they have contributed to enhancing the image of Hong Kong. But in the past, there were only $3 million a year, and now you're only talking about $5 million a year. That's the investment return of the seed money. We are not talking about a large number of people. So can the government take initiative to help them more, plan more for their future? Other than subsistence grants, I think employment facilitating grants is also very important. They have the abilities, and they may also have their wish. So how can you help them after they are retired? I don't know what the government has done in this area. Can you ask them what their wishes are and try to find jobs for them? And maybe because they are disabled, their employers may not be paying a market salary. Would the government be willing to put the gap? We are talking not about a huge amount each year. So would the government consider this? Will the government help them more in terms of policy? I'd like to thank Mr. Yu for his questions. Yes, for the application for employment facilitating grants, actually, we only saw 5 applications in the past, so that's really on the low side. We will definitely step up our publicity, in particular those athletes with abilities who are going to retire soon. After injecting the sum into the seed money, we will expand our eligibility scope, so that's more athletes with disabilities can apply. And actually, we hope that they can use their experience after they retire. For example, they can take up some attachment jobs in terms of training younger athletes. So we will try to expand the eligibility scope, and our management committee will be discussing all these. Well, for the employment facilitating grants, we will be providing the retired athletes with $60,000 a year for 2 years. Well, maybe Mr. Ma Fung-kwok can do something about it. I think it is all about publicity and taking the initiative. Well, if you advertise it more, then you are quite passive because you are just waiting people to come to apply. But for these athletes, they have physical difficulties, and maybe due to family problems, they may not take the initiative to apply. So I think the government should be more proactive because they have contributed to Hong Kong. You should stretch out to help them. So now you have $2 million more a year, and we are not talking about too many people. Here saying that you will expand the eligibility scope. Maybe you can also do more in this area. Next. Second round, Dr. Fernando Zhang, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. Well, for this Hong Kong Paralympians Fund, in the past, the Home Affairs Bureau treated Paralympians and elite athletes differently, and the EOC did publish a report on this. It said that the Hong Kong SAR government treated Paralympians and athletes and elite athletes very differently, and that's against the spirit of the Convention on People with Disabilities. So how come today the government is still doing this? We are talking about a 4 times difference. And do you think that the Paralympians are not working as hard as the elite athletes? Is it easier for them to get the medals? And they have not brought enough honor to Hong Kong. The honor they are bringing to Hong Kong is 4 or 5 times less than that's brought by the elite athletes. Next slide. Thank you, Dr. Zhang. Well, for HAB's support of Paralympians, in the last year, we provided $25 million in funding. Ms. Lai, please answer my question directly. Now you have this differential treatment, and it's 400 or 500% difference. Why is that? You mentioned the monthly subsistence grants. Well, we didn't only provide that. We also provided trainings and all sorts of supports to the Paralympians. Well, in the Sports Institute, elite athletes and Paralympians are trained at the same time, at the same venue. So we treat them equally. Well, you're talking about other things. I am talking about subsistence grants, and the difference is 4 or 5 times. You cannot answer my question. Can you provide information after the meeting? Well, we will look at the needs of the athletes. For athletes with disabilities and without disabilities, actually, we treat them the same when it comes to training hours. Now, you are talking about training. Well, we will consider all the factors. I think she is misleading us. For the athletes with disabilities, they want to be trained full-time as well. But with this kind of subsistence level, they cannot maintain living. So that's why they have to work on the side. So let's end this dialogue here. She has said that they're looking at it from the perspective of training. So I think she understands your question. Please follow up on this issue at on another platform, or you can move a motion. Mr. Ma Fung-kwok, Oh, sorry, Dr. Lam Tai-Fai first, because this is his first round. Thank you, Chairman. Just now, Dr. Fernando Chang made his remarks. I understand his view, and I also understand his concerns. But I think for able-bodied athletes and athletes with disabilities, I think you should not put them on oppositions. I think for both types of athletes, the government should do better. I'm not saying that the elite athlete system is already perfect, so we should only fight for the rights of the athletes with disabilities. Then you are only encouraging the government not to do better for the elite athletes. So no matter whether the athletes are elite or with disabilities, they both face a lot of problems. For example, education or career after retirement, etc. We have talked a lot about this, and also how can they balance their school and training lives. Now we are talking about a sum of $200 million. I believe a lot of people will criticize you, yet we will still approve the funding. Now in the paper there is a table. It covers the years 2009 to 2014, and we have 2 columns: total number of applications and amount of grants sought and eligible applications. Well, when we look at the number of applications, it has been dropping. And also the grants dispersed have also been dropping. Why is that? How come there are less and less applications? Is it that the Paralympians have not been performing well, and that's why you are giving them less grants, or have you raised the threshold, or what? In the past few years, the number of applications decreased because of the different frequencies of international events. For the applicants or application organizations, we will have to look at the performances in the past 2 years in international events. So for some events, they are held every 4 years. So that's why it would affect the number of applications in particular years. And that also explains the decrease in the past few years. As for the grants dispersed, it seems that they were also decreasing. Well, that is exactly why we are now applying for $200 million to be injected into the fund. Now we have been using our seed money. Now only $32 million are left. So we can only use an amount not more than 3 times of the seed money for granting the allowances. So that's why it has been decreasing. Yes, you are talking about different frequencies of international events. So do you mean that in the coming few years the total number of applications will increase because there will be many more international events? Okay, please wait for the second round. Now we still have Mr. Ma Fung Kwok, second round. I think my question is similar to that posed by Dr. Lam Tai-Fai. Now, have you thought about the cycles of the needs of athletes and the cycles of investment results or returns? Well, I think from the table I don't see this because I only see one climax there. And for the Olympics, it's held every 4 years. So how can it explain the cycle presented in your table? And how can you handle the 2 cycles? That is the cycle of athletes' needs and the cycle of investment returns. Well, if in 1 year they really have a great financial need, but is in terms of investment is at the low point of the cycle, what would you do? Now, when it comes to the application cycle, yes, it is linked with the staging of international events. I don't see that from the table. Yes, you told me that, but the table doesn't reflect what you said. For the major sports events, we were talking about 16 of them. So it depends on which sport the athlete is in. For example, if it's in rolling, then maybe the frequency is different, and this does not show in the table. As for the cycle of investment return, how can it be tied in with the cycle of events? Well, that is exactly what the management committee is doing. It's been reviewing this all the time, and of course our members' views will be related to the management committee, and this will be taken into account. Well, Chairman, I'm a bit worried. In the past few years, we've seen a decrease. I think he understands. Well, then we will have less and less Paralympians. Yes, I think he understands your concern. Next, Mr. Ip-Kin-yun, second round. Yes, I agree with Dr. Cheung. I think the these allowance levels, the levels of allowance given to Paralympians and elite athletes should be kept more or less the same. Now, for the management committee, when I look at its terms of reference, it seems that investments is not covered. So who makes the investment decision? Is it made by the management committee, or the SWD officials would make the decision, or you are hiring investment consultants to do that? Can you answer these questions? As for our investments, our finance unit under the SWD is taking care of that. And they are also looking after other funds, so they have very rich experience. But of course, we'll adopt an open attitude. For the terms of reference of the management committee, whether it can be expanded so that they would also make investment decisions. Well, we adopt an open attitude, and your views will be relayed to our department. I'm not asking you to do that. Well, I look at the names of the members sitting on the management committee. I don't think they are investment experts. So for investments, if different government departments making their own decisions, then I have some other questions, because for the SWD now you are managing a number of funds. So can you give us more information concerning that? Well, I do not have the relevant information at hand. Maybe after the meeting I can provide the information to the member. Next, Mr. Tan Ka-piu, second round. Well, Mr. Yip asked that question because he's a bit concerned, because I think Paralympians have been performing very well, but do you have enough funds for them? You are talking about a return of $5.5 million per year. That may not be enough. It's quite worrying. And for subsistence grants, accounts for only about 40% of the money you are talking about. I think our message is very clear. Is it possible for you to give us another paper? We want to know how to set the subsistence grants for athletes with disabilities, and that's for elite athletes. And how are you going to adjust it every year? I think there are criteria, right? So at least let us know. Well, now we see that there is a 4 to 5 times difference, but we want to know more about this, please give us a paper.
賴小姐剛才講過
Ms. Lai, can you put what you have said in a simple paper on the criteria in deciding the different levels of grants? Yes, the Labour and Welfare Bureau and the SWD would join efforts to prepare a paper. Dr. Fernando Zhang for the third round. Let me put this clear. It's not because of the Hong Kong Paralympian funds that we have this discrepancy between athletes with disabilities and able-bodied athletes. It's because the other scheme operated by the HAB has this big discrepancy, and that's why we need this Hong Kong Paralympians fund to narrow the gap, but still the difference is still big. Today, of course, we support the injection into the Hong Kong Paralympians fund, but apart from this, we are unable to narrow the gap. The HAB was very reluctant to do more to narrow the gap, even though the EOC has said this is in breach of the international covenant. I don't know whether the LWB can inject more into the fund. Maybe you can get another 200 million, 400 million, or 600 million to narrow the gap between the two levels. According to some athletes with disabilities, they need to get full-time training. We have some outstanding athletes with disabilities now, but can this be sustained? That's really doubtful. As an international city, if we treat the medal-winning athletes like this, this is really something shameful. Mr. Lam Tai Fai, I want to ask some of the remaining outstanding questions. I hope members will not try to pit able-bodied elite athletes against athletes with disabilities just because the government has done a poor job. I'm concerned that if we ask for the gap to be narrowed, then the government would just refuse to do more for able-bodied elite athletes. While we may be concerned about the treatment of athletes with disabilities, we should not highlight just the difference in treatment between the two groups. There's a management committee and grants subcommittee of the Hong Kong Paralympians Fund. Most of the members are athletes. They understand the needs of athletes, so I have confidence in them. It's not that they are not able to do a good job in providing grants. We provided $700 million to the Hong Kong Institute of Sport, and it was expected that there would be an income of $350 million per year, and if there's still a shortfall, there will be funding from another backup source. So I want to ask a question about the ceiling of funding, and that is 3 times the income. You should make the best use of available funds. Maybe you should increase the yield of your investment. After the investment, the 3-time rule will be cancelled. And another requirement, another rule will be cancelled. and that is we need to maintain a reserve of $30 million at any time. But with the injection, we are going to have a total amount of $230 million. Ms. Chen Yunhan, at the panel on welfare meeting, there was a heated discussion. We're not trying to pit one group against the other. The fact remains that very little is provided to athletes with disabilities. So they should do more to help the able-bodied elite athletes, and also at the same time do more for athletes with disabilities to narrow the gap. We should not give these athletes the impression that we are discriminating against athletes with disabilities. Well, we're not pitting one against the other, but that's just the objective truth that there's a big difference between their treatments. All right, if there's no other question, I'll put this item to the vote. Will those in favor of FCR bracket 2013-14 number 64, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those against? No one. Abstentions? No one. I think the majority of members are in favor of this item. This item is approved. We now proceed to the seventh item, item number 7, FCR bracket 2013-14 number 65. This item invites members to approve the creation of a new subhead, payment to the lotteries fund under head 184, transfers to funds, and a supplementary provision of $10 billion under the new subhead to enable an injection to be made to the lotteries fund. On the 10th of February, the Labour and Welfare Bureaus consulted the panel on welfare to discuss the funding proposal. Today we have Ms. Annie Tam, Permanent Secretary for Labour and Welfare, Mr. Sher Wingman, Principal Assistant Secretary for Labour and Welfare, and Mr. Lem Kartai, Deputy Director of Social Welfare, as well as Mr. Kwok Chi Leung, Assistant Director of Social Welfare, in attendance to answer members' questions. May I invite Mr. Chen Yunhan, member as chairperson of the panel on welfare, to brief us on the deliberation of the panel. Thank you, Chairman. There was a discussion of the panel on welfare on the 10th of February 2014 on the funding proposal. Members supported the funding proposal in principle, but there were members who thought that the information provided was incomplete. They also noted that whether the applying organizations would make the special use or launch special programs on the land which they owned, and increase the provision of self-financing services. They asked the government to provide details of the applications submitted by these organizations before approval by the FC, and also to issue guidelines on the ratio between subvented and self-financial services. I think there's some online services. The speaker's not coming through. Well, they promised us to inform members by 1 p.m. yesterday. Also, the information was submitted to us. I don't know whether this is made available to members. It's CP2 927/1314/01. I don't know why all 3 or 4 of us in the panel, on the panel, do not receive the information paper. But this is important. because it's very useful in facilitating understanding. I've read it. I think it's very good. Some members might not have received this. Actually, the Secretariat sent the paper to us yesterday. I don't know what happened in the course of distribution. I just want to inform members of this fact. All right, questions? 4 minutes for each member. First one, Dr. Fernando Cheung. Thank you. Of course, we support this item. We're talking about identifying more sites to develop the urgently needed social welfare services, including services for the elderly or rehab services, whether we're talking about elderly homes or residential homes or day centers. Altogether, we're talking about 17,000 places, service places, which are urgently needed. The injection is in the sum of $10 billion to the lotteries fund. Well, I believe that this is an attempt to reduce the surplus, because it's expected that in the coming budget a surplus will be announced. So instead of a deficit of a few $billion, now it would have a surplus, and this injection will reduce the amount of surplus. But the program, this particular program, is still in an initial stage, and therefore, when we asked for details, we didn't get much. And now we know that through email there was a paper sent to us, and I've just received the paper. So we've got more information. We know the 60 odd projects, where they are, and how much will be involved, how many places will be provided. And of course, we only know the locations and the categories of service. We don't want to spend public money, complete some projects, and then a high percentage of the services provided will be self-financed or operated like a private business in the market. We hope these facilities under these 60 odd projects would provide more premises to facilitate the provision, the enhancement of services which are much needed. So there must be a cap on the ratio taken up by the self-financing services and programs. In the past, when the lotteries funds provided support to some organizations for some construction projects, whereby there's a self-financing element, then part of the construction cost will have to be borne by the proponent. But this time, this particular requirement is waived, so we need to take a harder look at these projects. But so far, the government hasn't actually imposed a ceiling on the ratio between the subvented and self-financing services. What's the government's position on this? Thank you, Chairman. In the paper we submitted to members last year, we addressed precisely this issue, and we have provided some more information. In paragraph 4, 5, and 6, we set out our response. These items, these programs, like the other applications made to the lotteries fund, they will be assessed in accordance with the same procedures. These are facilities that are regarded as essential and needed by the SWD, including the self-financial parts. In deciding the number of places, we look at the need as assessed by the SWD and the allocation of places will be dealt with under the usual procedures. We look at the long-term need, the preference of service users, and also the level of maturity of the particular service in the market. So the same approach is adopted whether there is a self-financial portion, and that is the SWT will talk to the service provider in question, and we'll look at our needs, and we'll also look at the preference of service users and the level of market development of that particular segment. For subvented, you can see that usually under the 21 services, the numbers for subvented services are relatively higher. So there's no special ratio. If this is not something special, for example, when it comes to homes for the elderly, residential homes for the elderly, the usual ratio is 60-40. For this special program, we will take a look to see whether this ratio should be adjusted upwards or downwards, but suffice it to say that the subvented portion is relatively higher in proportion. Mr. James Tin. I'm not a member of the panel on welfare. Mr. Yik Chi Ming represents my party on that panel. He has briefed me, and the Liberal Party supports this item. But we have a concern about how the allocation of fund is done. $10 billion is a big sum. We have been saying that the government should spend money where money should be spent, and now the $10 billion will be transferred to the fund. It will be a long time before the money is actually spent. The government is just trying to create the illusion that we don't have so much surplus in our treasury, and the money is not actually expended. The lotteries fund is managed and supervised by the government. We are saying that the government is sitting on $3 trillion and some in the exchange fund. And very quickly, the government has decided to transfer $10 billion to this fund. But of course, we're concerned whether the government will repeat this. And every year, you are only going to spend how much is going to be expended? Just the income from the $10 billion, or what? The Liberal Party is in support of the expansion projects in the paper. How long would it take for you to spend the entire injection? If it would take a long time, then you are helping the government to create the illusion that the government is not sitting on so big a surplus. Second point. I have 4 minutes, right? I think some of the questions can be answered by the FSTB. Actually, the members are experts who are responsible for approving the grants. It seems that you don't have any wealth management experts. It's not. I'm concerned that it will end up like the MPF, and you would be losing money. Would you be appointing experts on the committee to look after investment? Who would take the questions? One member, 2 members have spoken on this, and one member opined that this is about creating or reducing the surplus. Well, actually, this is a transfer from the general revenue to the lotteries fund. So this will have no effect on the deficit or surplus of the government's accounts in 2013 to 2014. after the transfer to the lotteries fund, and according to the existing mechanism, every application for funding will be assessed individually, and only funds expended will count as expenditure.
請秘書長。
On investment and how the money is spent, Ms. Tam. Now, when we consider this funding, we consider that they need $20 billion for these items, and the lotteries fund has only $10 billion surplus. And by injecting the fund, the NGOs can be confident that the government is committed. You cannot spend the money of $10 billion within a few years. You have a time limit for the spending of the money. Now, the lotteries fund, money put in the fund can be used for any applications to the fund, and not just for these projects or items. Now, these items are at different stages. Some stages are already at the stage where they have to spend the money, say, on feasibility studies. And if some projects are already mature, well, on expansion, now, even for the electrical building, it's 5 years. Now, expansion is, say, only 2 or 3 years, so you can tell us the time horizon. Now, some projects may last no longer than 5 years, some may last longer. Now, they have to get the money in order to do the feasibility study. So it's not that we only pay them when work starts. We provide the money in stages. Now, the second question has not been answered. Who will manage the $10 billion? Investment experts. Well, let that question be answered when time is available. I think the monetary authority would be more confidence-inspiring. Now, since 2003, the lotteries fund has been managed by taking it as if it's a part of the exchange fund. Mr. Chair Wai-Chun, we're talking about 60-odd items or projects. Now, they may not be embarked on right away. They may be in stages, so we ask for information. Now, I looked at some of the information yesterday. It was supplied to us rather light, but it doesn't matter. Now, these projects, as the Permanent Secretary said, are not all immediate. Now, we want there to be 17,000 places as quickly as possible, but I don't think we expect the government to push out the projects right away so that the costs will be pushed up. Now, the lotteries fund, now it's more than $10 billion, so the income is $1.6 billion, and the expenditure is $800 million. So you already have $10 billion. So why do you need to increase by $10 billion? The Secretary said that as in para 11, now if these are special projects, so they may require more money. So maybe you need $20 billion. Now, in that case, there would be quite a lot of work involved. Now, if the work is up to only these, is to be done only by these applying organizations who serve the elderly and the disabled. And when you embark on these things, we would involve also additional manpower to handle them, because you're talking about $20 billion. The Permanent Secretary, the member understands correctly. As mentioned in Para 9, we are assuming that the projects are all technically feasible, and if we support all of them at money of the day prices, they will cost $20 billion. Now, on manpower arrangement, now for the government, the Labor and Welfare Bureau will not increase manpower for this. We will deploy existing manpower for this scheme, and at the Department of Social Welfare, they hope to have additional manpower to help take the scheme forward. Now, as for the social welfare sector, of course, they need to make their own manpower arrangements. As mentioned in paragraph 12, in the document supplied yesterday, we explained that these organizations will plan themselves and the government will help to coordinate. We use our discretionary power to let them include some ancillary facilities in the same floor area, such as training facilities for the staff, and we have invited the Elderly Commission and the Rehabilitation Commission to give us some ideas and suggestions, and we will submit the info to these two commissions so that they can do some planning for us. Chuan Kwok Chair. Now, having read the document sent over yesterday by the Labor and Welfare Bureau, I find the document helpful. Otherwise, I would need to ask many more questions today. Now, in the welfare panel, I mentioned that this scheme is unprecedented because as a service organization, organizations, they will be able to supply 60-odd plus pieces of land. This will be a big help to the government. But I hope the government will not rely only on these 60-odd sites, because normally when you develop the services, those are not the services that you normally develop, they should be continued. Now, on rehabilitation, it mentions that there are 6,000 odd, there will be 6,000 odd places, but no information on services for the elderly. Now, for these 60-odd sites, in order that they tie in with government plans for development, there should be some development in all districts. For instance, there is none in Central and Western. Now, the government should estimate what's the demand in different districts, and then through the 60-odd sites and the future developments planned by the government, you should try to meet the needs in different districts. And in the most needy districts, you should do whatever you need to fill the gap. Now, the government and the member associations of SOCO should have a committee to preside over the development of these projects, because they last many years. So the resources should be used effectively. Now, will the government have such a group? Now, once you have such a group, you need to have a 5 to 10 year service plan for the elderly and the disabled. Now, will you have such a service plan? Now, for these $20 billion, apart from covering construction costs, will they include the startup costs? Because we know the lotteries fund sometimes pays for startup funding. Now, para 9 and 10, at para 9 and 11 of the documents supplied yesterday provide the answers. As Mr. Chung knows, these organizations, they supply these 60-odd sites. These sites belong to them, and they think the sites need to be redeveloped, and we require that the buildings are more than 20 years old. So the distribution of these sites tend to be in certain areas, but not in others. Now, in Para 11, we mentioned that we will work with the Planning Department, the Lands Department, so that there will be development in every district, and in the process we will take into account the circumstances of the special scheme so that to even out the services in the districts. Now, as for the schemes for the elderly, now we have identified sites already apart from the 6,200 rehabilitation places. We also have sites for services to the elderly. That's in Para 11. Now, with SOCO, we already have a working group that has been operating. And the group already exists. Now, for long-term planning, as mentioned, made clear in the information, we think medium to long-term planning is very important. For elderly services, we work with the Elderly Commission, and SOCO already sits on the Elderly Commission. As how to take things forward, we will talk to the Commission. As for rehabilitation, we will we will seek the opinions of the Advisory Committee on Rehabilitation, and SOCO also sits on that committee. We will talk to the sector. Please be brief in your questions, otherwise you will exceed the 4-minute slot. Next, Ms. Chen Yun-Han. We certainly support this item. Why do I say certainly? Because the government has tried to resolve some of the problems among its departments, because the NGOs will supply the land, and then the Planning Department and Labor and Welfare Bureau will cooperate. They already told us before that this will be forthcoming. That was in September last year, and we'll certainly support it. But we want to look at the details. Now, for these services, as Chuan Kwok-chi just said, clearly some districts are lacking in these services. For instance, Central and Western. Maybe they don't need the services. No, that's not true. People age in every district. Now, if there is none, then maybe you should plan for them. Because the disabled, and they also get old too. I also stressed that was the ratio between the self-financing and the subvented services offered. Now, I hope the Permanent Secretary can supply us with the information next time. Now, I understand that the PS is working on this too, and that is the homes for the elderly or for the disabled. They are short of manpower. Now, this is relevant when we talk about import of labor. Now, so in our meetings, we tell the PS, when you redevelop the sites, there should be areas or places to absorb the women who want to work in every district, but you have to let them take care of their children first. In Hong Kong has most difficulty with manpower just before the reunification. Standard Chartered Bank offers childcare services to attract female employees. When our population is aging, this is a very good measure. I don't want to hear about import of labor, because many people are still looking for work. The PS knows this, the Planning Department knows this, so there should be support. Brief response, please. Ms. Chen has given us some useful suggestions. I'd like to thank the so-called the NGOs, Planning Department, Lands Department, Building Department. They have all been very helpful. Now, on the first question by Ms. Chen, we've already answered that. In some districts, there are restrictions because the land is owned by the welfare organizations and they have their own development plans. So in the future, we will try to fill the gaps in districts that do not have land. We will work with the planning department to find the land. Now, on manpower arrangement, Ms. Chen is correct. In the document in paragraph 12, we stress that if the social welfare organization is willing to provide child care service for staff, we would consider not more than 10% of the floor area being assigned for that purpose. Next, Lee Chuk-yan. Thank you, Chairman. First, to follow up on Dr. Fernando Cheung's question. Now, I want to hear clearly, it may be tricky part in the answer. They said that for the special scheme, welfare organization homes for the elderly must be 60% subvented and not more than 40% for the self-financing places. Now, the government offers the money for the expansion. Now, even though the land belongs to them, there should be an assurance about the number of subvented places. Otherwise, if they only offer self-financing services, then there would be trouble. Now, they can charge $20,000 per place. It's very different from the subvented places. So can you be more clear? Now, you say it can be adjusted upward or downward. Now, the Labour Party wants upward adjustment of the subvented places, but you seem to have said that the subvented places can be adjusted downward, so that worries me. Now, on the 17,000 places, now do you have some estimate on the manpower required? In particular, there would be a shortage of medical services staff. Now, how do you train the expected staff required? Now, how do you tell people that you have a training scheme? But because, as Cheung Kwok-chi said, 17,000 elderly and disabled may require almost 10,000 staff. Now, you say expansion in situ. Now, that will affect the elderly who are already there. Now, do you have arrangements for that? How do you minimize the impact? Now, starting with the last part, now, if certain organizations want to join the special scheme, or if they don't, when they redevelop or rebuild in situ, and they need to relocate the elderly or the service users, we will try to provide support. We have a moving fee, and we have discretion. We exercise discretionary power to allocate the money from the lotteries fund. In the manpower plan, in paragraph 12 of the document supplied yesterday, we said that after the scheme is introduced, we may be talking about over 10,000 places. So that will require a lot of manpower. And the organization itself will also plan as well. The government will help it in several respects. Now, certain of these facilities have height restrictions, building height restrictions, and the planning department might allow them to build taller buildings. And apart from the facilities mentioned, we can also allow the premises to be used for training or child care services for the staff.
And in terms of planning, yes, we'll have to revisit that. So for the information under the special scheme. They will be divided into two types, that is rehabilitation and elderly, and we will be giving those information to the Elderly Commission and the Rehabilitation Commission. So how about the first question? I think she will be repeating herself if she answers this question. Maybe Mr. Lam can answer the questions. Yes, how about the 60-40 ratio? Now, for our new elderly homes, well, 60% of the places will be subvented and 40% will be non-subvented places. Of course, we will have to take the NGOs' plans into account. If the NGOs are providing certain non-subvented places, well, then other than our traditional mode of subventions, we also have another program. That is, we will buy the places. So there are different channels of subventions. So for the new elderly homes, the ratio will be 60% subvented and 40% self-financing. So we'll look at the maturity of the market and the needs of the service recipients. Of course, we will talk to the NGOs and we will try to come up with the best arrangements. Next, Mr. Wong Kwok Heng. Well, Chairman, I support this paper. However, I have some questions and I hope the administration can answer them. First of all, about the table in enclosure 2. And there are 4 types of services. The places increase will be 17,394. This keeps people expectations, but under paragraph 8, it seems that there is no clear timetable for the realization of these places. So I would like to ask the government, with regard to enclosure 2, now, NGOs are giving you proposals, but do you have a timetable from them? When can these places become real? Then we can monitor the progress. Because if in 5 or 10 years' time we still do not see these places, then people will be very disappointed. This is the first question. Now, this is a special scheme. So NGOs would join the scheme voluntarily. So that's why we see this totally unbalanced distribution. In Central and Western, we don't see a single place. So I would like to ask the government, does the government have its own plan? Other than this special scheme, does the government has its own goals? Can you also give us a timetable? Oh, sorry, can you give us another table so that we know how many places will be provided in the future? Now, for Central and Western, for all the 4 types of services, the figure is 0. So would it be like the long-term housing strategy? Because, well, the government has a 10-year long-term housing strategy, and Hong Kong is an aging society, so we really need services for the elderly. Of course, we also need services for the disabled. So does the government have long-term plans, and does the government have a clear timetable for that? P.S. We have more than 60 projects, and they are at different stages of development. In the supplementary paper we provided to members, well, 5 of them can be completed by 2017 to 2018, and the others will start in the same year. So they have to go through the town planning departments, the lands department, and the housing department. Now, the land use of the site may be different from the land use stipulated by the town planning department, so they may have to apply to the town planning board for a change of land use. And also we will have to conduct district consultation, and if there are objections from a particular community, we will have to take care of that as well. So when you asked about a timetable. We have to do it on a case-by-case basis. We will liaise closely with the NGOs and the relevant departments. We hope that these can be done as soon as possible. When we get more information, of course, that information will be shared with members. As for the government's long-term planning, as stated in our paper, when it comes to elderly services, we hope that in 2 years' time, the Elderly Commission can come up with a elderly service plan. Of course, the Elderly Commission would be looking at the long-term planning for elderly services. I hope the government can compress a timetable. Well, if you come up with a plan and it takes 2 years, that will be too long. Mr. Tam Yu Chung, with regard to elderly institutions and institutions for PWDs, I think there is indeed a huge demand. We have talked about this many times. I have asked the government to put together a 5-year plan instead of looking at the money available and the places available each year. If you have more resources that year, you would try to provide more places. I don't want to see that. I want to see a more long-term plan. And now you have come up with this idea that is the special scheme. You hope that through redevelopments, more places can be provided. Yes, I understand the PS has tried her best. This is good. We support that. However, it may not be that easy and smooth. We ask you when we can see all these new places. You cannot answer us. I'm sure there will be a lot of hurdles on the way. Now, sums of money earmarked for this purpose. I agree to that. Because if you have to compete with other departments for resources in the future, then the projects will be delayed. Now, if you identify a site, you can start as soon as possible. So I hope that different government departments can cooperate. The PS worked at the Lands Department, so I hope that Lands Department can be more cooperative, because some projects may involve a change in land use. But I think that when the special scheme is implemented, there will be a lot of complex issues. I don't know when we can really see this 17,000 new places. But at least each year, if we can see some more places, that would already be acceptable. And on the whole, I support the paper. Well, maybe we can also enjoy 1 or 2 of those 17,000 places. Yes, I think it's about time. Next, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Yes, I've heard about the ratio of 6:4. And I would like to ask the government, how do you set this ratio? Do you look at the supply and demand, or it's just set randomly? How do you know that 6 will be enough for subvented places? But you say that, of course, for the self-financing places, you can also buy them. But how do you set this ratio? Do you look at the affordability of the elderly? Well, you have already answered several times about these ratios. Can you answer again? Well, for the ratio of 6:4, when we look at our contracted elderly homes, we'll have looked at the ratio between subvented and self-financing places. Well, we think that for non-subvented places, well, they would be welcomed by some people as well, because some families may be able to afford more. However, for our special scheme, we will spend most of the money on subvented places. Mr. Leung asked about our basis for calculation. Well, we learned from our past experience. We think this is already a balanced figure. But in the past, I didn't think it's effective. Now, of course, if people want better services, they can look in a private market. They can do whatever they like. They can also hire a helper to take care of the elder at home. The problem is we do not have enough subvented places. Do you admit that? Because when the elders are waiting in a long queue and some will pass away before they can be allocated a place. And you are now asking for $10 billion. It's public money. So how come you are not providing more subvented places? Now the housing authority is already thinking in this direction. So why can't you change the ratio of 6:4? And you say that if that's not enough, you can buy places from the private market. Now you are using money and policies to help these NGOs. Maybe you can even change your policy to help the elderly more. We have already compressed the ratio of non-subvented places. Now, before we have this special scheme, NGOs could already apply to the lottery fund for redevelopment, but they have to pay 10% of the construction cost. And of course, at that time, they could ask for more self-financing places. But because of this special scheme, the number of self-financing places has already been compressed. So now we will have 60% subvented places. So why can't you increase the 60%? Well, you can impose certain conditions on the NGOs because now they are trying to get money from the government. Any supplement? I think we have to strike a balance. As I said just now, well, for each project, we will negotiate with the NGOs. We will try to get the best ratio. We are nearing the end of the second session. And let us count the number of members. Well, we just have a quorum. So please use time more efficiently because we do not have a lot of time left. Yes, you can ask questions again in the second round. We will end the meeting by 7:55. Next, Dr. Fernando Zhang, second round, 2 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. For the ratio between subvented and self-financing places, well, we have been talking about it because now these NGOs are building facilities and we want more subvented services. Because for self-financing services, the service will follow the money. For subvented services, we don't care about the income of the service recipient. We just look at his needs, and that's need-oriented. We should work in this direction. As for the contracted elderly homes, and now you have a ratio of 6:4. Actually, the NGOs are not too happy about it. In this year's policy address, the bought places in disabled homes have increased to 70%. So I hope that this ratio can also be increased. And for rehabilitation services, they are 100% subvented. So I want you to guarantee that this special scheme won't be worse off than the present situation. Now, because this special scheme will give rise to new facilities. and the services provided in the future would not be worse than the services provided now. What I mean is that the ratio of subvented services can be increased, and we are talking about a lot of elderly services and rehabilitation services. And for elderly services, you have a concrete planning, and you are going to seek more funds so that you can create more posts. And under the Elderly Commission, they have a proper plan which will be implemented. However, for rehabilitation services, nothing has started yet. So in terms of rehabilitation service, will you do the same thing? Then we can look at the picture more comprehensively. Your time is up. Please try to answer the question concisely. Yes, I would like to thank Dr. Chang for his opinion. We've heard it loud and clear. We will talk to the NGOs, and we will consider increasing subvented services. We understand that there is a huge demand for subvented services, and there are long queues waiting for these services. So we will look at the issue from the user's perspective, and of course we would consider the long-term needs of the community. Well, at the elderly, well, we will commission the Elderly Commission to come up with a plan on elderly services. So the relevant information, including those concerning the special scheme, will be provided to them. I'm sure the Commission, the Elderly Commission, will help us. So will the elderly other than that, will there be a timetable for the provision of rehabilitation services? Yes, we have a plan, but that was formulated in 2008. Yes, we understand. We are talking to the Rehabilitation Commission, so we will provide a special scheme information to them. We hope that they can help us in planning. But that is different from the elderly services. We are doing a plan for the elderly services for the first time. Mr. Leung Kwok Hong, well, just now you said that you will negotiate with the NGOs. How do you do that? How do you negotiate with the NGOs? Well, the NGOs have been making applications to the Lotteries Fund, so we have been negotiating with them. Maybe Mr. Lam can tell you more, because it's the task of this SWD. Now we will actually go to the NGOs, and we will go visit the actual sites. Now, first of all, we want to know what kind of service do they want to enhance. And if they are providing self-financing services, what's their experience in that, and what their track records? And if they are proposing certain services, and if they have to be matched with certain day services, and they do not have that kind of service, then we will ask them to make adjustment. For example, institutes for seriously handicapped persons, daytime centers may have to be provided to them, so they have to adjust accordingly. Now, well, if an NGO claims it owns a site, I don't think that's true, because that site actually belongs to Hong Kong people. The NGO is just using that site for a certain period of time. Well, if we want to change the ratio to 8:2, can you make them do it? You cannot, right? If you say that the policy from now on will be 8:2, how can you achieve it through the negotiations? Will you be imposing certain conditions on them? I don't think Mr. Leung has to be worried. The NGOs really want to serve the community, and that's why they are joining this special scheme. And they will attach importance to the interests of the service users. These are very good NGOs. Now, last member, Dr. Fernando Cheung, 1 minute. I just need 1 minute. Well, I want to talk about rehabilitation service. Well, 2008 was 5 or 6 years ago. And I think actually from last year, well, you actually should have put together a new plan in last year, because normally the cycle is 5 years. And here we have over 8,000 places that are for rehabilitation. That is of a big scale. How can you have no plan? So I hope that you will look at this seriously.
They should start now. How else can we cope with the needs? And the principle behind elderly services and rehab services are the same. The two should form part of an integral program. All right, if there's no other question, I'll put this item to the vote. Will those in favor of FCR 2013-14, number 65, please raise your hands. Thank you. Those against? No, no one. One abstention. Let's put this on record. I think the majority of members are in favor of this item. This item is approved. We have completed all the items. I'll inform members of the date of the next meeting.